The sky above Caltheron darkened as the massive warships of the Varnak fleet blocked out the sun, casting cold shadows over the city below. For weeks, the peaceful human colony had lived in quiet hope, far from the wars of the galaxy, tending to their farms, factories, and families. But that hope shattered when the first Varnak dropships thundered down, ripping through the atmosphere like falling comets. The Varnak were known across the stars as brutal conquerors, merciless hunters who crushed any world that dared resist. Their armor gleamed with an unholy dark sheen, and their weapons spat fire that could melt stone and flesh alike. Caltheron's defenders were unprepared. The colony's few militia forces melted like ice in a furnace under the sudden, overwhelming attack. Buildings exploded in fireballs, and screams echoed through the streets as the Varnak warriors pushed forward with terrifying speed. Civilians ran, stumbled, and hid where they could, but the invaders showed no mercy. As the city burned, the Varnak general stood high on his command ship's bridge, watching the destruction with cold satisfaction. He expected a quick victory, a prize to boast of in the Galactic Accord. But the silence that followed the initial assault disturbed him. Instead of cries of surrender or pleas for mercy, there was only a haunting quiet. His scout drone sent back strange images, empty streets, flickering shadows, and then suddenly, bursts of gunfire not from advanced alien weapons, but from strange, crude devices wielded by humans, running through the ruins. Confused, the general ordered a squad to investigate. What returned shocked the entire command fleet. The soldiers were ragged but alive, their faces set with an unshakable fury, their movements unpredictable and wild. The humans were not hiding. They were hunting. The general's pride twisted into anger as reports came in of ambushes in narrow alleys, traps sprung from simple machines, and entire Varnak patrols wiped out with tools scavenged from the rubble. The humans fought with no uniforms, no heavy armor, only grit and sharp minds. The general could not understand it. How could these fragile beings survive? More importantly, how could they strike back with such deadly effectiveness? Deep inside the colony, Lee Sato, a young engineer, led a small group of survivors through the crumbling tunnels beneath Caltheron. Her hands trembled not from fear but from anger. She had lost her brother in the first attack and vowed no Varnak would take more from her home. Around her, the people whispered about what the humans had become since the ships fell. No longer were they simple settlers or farmers. They were shadows in the dark, ghosts moving unseen, ready to strike. Leah's group had managed to salvage power tools, scrap metal, and even some old agricultural drones, repurposing them into deadly weapons and traps. Every corner they turned held the possibility of a new surprise for the invaders. Above them, the Varnak pressed on, sending larger squads and calling for reinforcements. But each time they advanced, they met new resistance, unexpected and brutal. The general's frustration grew as his soldiers reported strange tactics, humans using the colony's ruined machines against them, firing electrified nets from makeshift launchers and triggering explosions by cutting through fuel lines with expert precision. One Varnak commander, battered and exhausted, admitted to his peers that these humans fought without fear, without rules, and without hesitation. The general clenched his fists and ordered a full bombardment, hoping to crush all resistance with overwhelming firepower. Yet even as the skies filled with plasma storms, the humans did not break. They vanished into tunnels, reappeared in ruined factories, and emerged with weapons scavenged from the very wreckage that surrounded them. Rumors spread among the invaders about a ghost force humans who could pass unseen, strike without warning, and disappear like smoke. The Varnak began to fear not just the humans' weapons, but their will to survive. In the command ship, the general replayed the footage of a recent skirmish. He saw a squad of his best soldiers caught in a trap surrounded by human fighters armed with nothing more than modified mining tools and scrap metal. The soldiers fell one by one, unable to fight an enemy who refused to follow the expected rules of war. The general's voice was cold but shaken as he muttered to himself, "We brought hell to them, but they brought something worse." Across the city, the flames of Caltheron continued to burn, but in the shadows, a new kind of fire was rising, a fire fueled by desperation, anger, and an unyielding will to fight. Humanity was no longer the prey. It was the hunter. The Varnak thought the humans would break after the first wave of destruction, but Caltheron's ruins told a different story. The city's streets were empty at first glance, but beneath the rubble and shadows, a quiet resistance was growing stronger. The survivors moved like whispers, never in large groups, always careful, always watching. Leah Sato and her team had slipped away into the labyrinth of tunnels below the colony, where they turned old mining shafts and forgotten service corridors into secret bases. Here, humans were no longer weak victims but fighters who learned quickly. They took what the invaders left behind: broken machines, discarded weapons, even simple tools meant for farming, and turned them into traps, bombs, and makeshift guns. Each night, they struck with precision, like shadows attacking the enemy's blind spots, disappearing before the Varnak could respond. The invaders grew angry and confused. Their technology was superior, their strength unmatched, but they had never faced an enemy who used the terrain itself as a weapon. The Varnak patrols, once confident, now moved cautiously, scanning for hidden wires and trip traps, knowing that a single misstep could be their last. This silent resistance frustrated their commanders, who demanded swift action and clear victories, but all they got were lost squads and broken equipment. Leah worked tirelessly, her mind sharp as a blade. She knew the Varnak expected fear and chaos, but instead they found order and calm in the darkness. Her small team built and tested improvised devices: magnetic spikes to disable armor, electrified nets to capture soldiers, and smoke bombs to hide their movements. They hacked into the colony's old communication lines, sending false signals to mislead enemy patrols. The humans no longer fought with honor or tradition, they fought with survival on their minds alone. As days passed, stories began to spread among the Varnak ranks of a human force that was everywhere and nowhere, striking without warning and melting back into the shadows. One veteran Varnak officer said with a growl, "They have no fear. No mercy. They fight like animals." Another whispered that these humans did not care about death, they embraced it as a weapon. The invaders' confidence shattered further when a Varnak dropship was destroyed by what seemed like an impossible attack: a magnetic rail spike fired from an old mining rig, reworked by the humans. The weapon tore through the ship's hull, sending it crashing into the mountainside. The Varnak began to realize they were not just facing resistance, but a calculated, deadly force. The colony's underground factories, once used to mine minerals and grow crops, had become hubs of war production. Humans scavenged parts and powered machines with jury-rigged generators, building traps and weapon systems from nothing. Leah coordinated these efforts, using her engineering skills to turn scrap into tools of war. She believed that survival meant adapting faster than the enemy, and every failure taught them a lesson. The Varnak responded by trying to flood the tunnels with smoke and gas, hoping to flush out the humans, but Leah's team had already prepared air filters and hidden exits. The humans were always one step ahead. Tension grew with each passing day. The invaders grew desperate, sending larger forces to crush the rebels, but the humans remained elusive. Ambushes became routine. One night, a squad of Varnak soldiers marched into a ruined factory only to find it rigged with explosives linked to motion sensors. When they triggered the trap, the explosion destroyed the entire building and left survivors stunned. The humans didn't just fight, they made the environment itself a weapon. Meanwhile, Leah's small group was joined by others who escaped the initial attack. They shared knowledge and resources, building a network of cells that could communicate and strike across the colony. Each cell was independent, but linked by a common goal: to drive the Varnak out or die trying. Leah's brother's death was a constant fire in her heart, pushing her forward. She rarely slept, always planning the next move, the next trap, the next strike. She knew the Varnak underestimated them, and that was their advantage. One day, a Varnak commander captured a young human scout but was surprised. When the prisoner smiled, unafraid, and said, "You think you brought hell. We are the storm that follows." The commander's expression darkened as he realized the human's resolve was something he had never faced. The fighting wore on, and the Varnak realized this war would not be over quickly. Their losses mounted, their patience thinned. In the command ship orbiting above, the general paced in silence, replaying reports of ambushes and failed assaults. He understood now that Caltheron was no longer a simple conquest. It was a battlefield where the rules had changed. His soldiers had brought terror, but the humans had brought something worse, an unbreakable will to fight, a mind that adapted to every threat, and a hatred born from survival and loss. The general gritted his teeth and prepared to unleash greater firepower, but deep inside, a seed of doubt had been planted. As the colony smoldered, the humans moved through the darkness, silent, deadly, and unstoppable. They were no longer the hunted. They were the hunters. The Varnak believed that destroying the surface cities of Caltheron would end the human resistance, but beneath the ground, in the dark depths of forgotten tunnels and abandoned mines, a new force was rising, one that the invaders did not expect. The humans had turned their ruined colony into a forge of war, where old machines meant for peaceful work were reborn as weapons of survival. Lee Sato moved through these tunnels like a shadow, her eyes sharp and her mind sharper. In the deep underground workshops, she and her team worked tirelessly to convert mining lasers into cutting tools, scrap metal into armor plating, and agricultural drones into scouts that could sneak into Varnak camps unseen. The air was thick with smoke and sparks as makeshift factories hummed quietly, hidden from the enemy above. Every clang of metal and hiss of steam was a sign of defiance. The humans were no longer just defending themselves. They were learning how to attack with the precision of predators. Varnak patrols that had once ruled the surface found themselves hunted in turn, caught in traps that seemed impossible to predict. One group walked into a maze of narrow tunnels rigged with tripwires and explosive charges, their heavy armor useless in the confined spaces. Another squad was ambushed by drones that fired electric bolts, disabling their weapons before the humans moved in for the kill. Reports from the field filled the Varnak command with growing fear and frustration. They realized that the humans had something no other species they had fought before possessed: ingenuity born from desperation and a fierce will to survive. Deep within the underground network, Lee gathered her leaders to plan their next moves. Their communication systems were crude, patched together from old colony tech and salvaged parts, but effective enough to coordinate surprise attacks across vast areas. Each survivor cell operated independently, but struck as one when the time was right. Leah knew the Varnak would try to find and destroy these workshops, so they constantly moved their operations, dismantling and rebuilding as needed. This war was no longer fought only with weapons. It was a battle of minds and willpower. The colony's old smelters and foundries, once silent relics, had become factories of resistance. Humans who had once been miners, farmers, and engineers now worked as weaponsmiths and tacticians, turning raw materials into the tools of their survival. Lee herself spent long hours refining designs for electromagnetic pulse traps and silent cutting tools that could slice through Varnak armor without warning. One night, while inspecting a newly crafted railgun made from scavenged parts, Lee received a coded message. A scout team had discovered that the Varnak were preparing to send a fleet to bombard the colony from orbit, hoping to destroy the underground workshops and end the human resistance once and for all. The news spread quickly, bringing urgency to their preparations. Leah organized a strike team to sabotage the fleet's command station hidden on a nearby mountain peak. The plan was risky. It meant climbing exposed terrain under enemy watch and infiltrating a heavily guarded base. But Leah knew the stakes. If the fleet controlled the skies, the humans would be crushed. Moving silently in the dead of night, the strike team used stealth and distraction to bypass the Varnak guards. Their knowledge of the terrain gave them an edge, but danger lurked at every step. The command station was fortified, bristling with sensors and weapons, yet the humans found a weak point, a ventilation shaft that led inside. One by one, they slipped through, avoiding patrols and disabling alarms. Inside, Leah's team worked quickly, planting explosives and hacking systems to send false signals that would cause confusion among the fleet's ships. Moments before their escape, alarms blared and a fierce firefight erupted. Bullets and plasma bolts filled the corridors, but the humans fought with desperate determination. In the chaos, they managed to slip out through hidden tunnels, leaving behind a command station that exploded in a brilliant fireball. From orbit, the Varnak fleet scrambled to regain control, but the false signals caused chaos in their ranks. Ships fired on each other, communications were lost, and for the first time, the invaders felt the sting of disarray. Leah's success sent a clear message. The humans were not beaten, not by technology, not by fire, not by fear. Yet the cost was high. Many of her team were wounded or lost, and the Varnak's retaliation was swift. They unleashed patrols to scour the tunnels, flooding passages with gas and deploying hunting parties that forced the humans to retreat deeper underground. The fight became a deadly game of cat and mouse, with humans disappearing just as the Varnak closed in, only to strike again when least expected. Despite the danger, Lee refused to give up. Her resolve was fueled by memories of those lost and the hope of a future free from invaders. In the heart of the colony's underground forge, she prepared for the next phase of the war, a plan that would turn the Varnak's own technology against them and prove once and for all that the human spirit was unstoppable. As the days passed, strange reports reached the Varnak commanders, humans seen crawling inside their ships, sabotaging systems from within, and using knowledge gained from the colony's forges to fight on every front. The invaders realized too late that they had underestimated their enemy. The ghosts of the forge were more than just survivors. They were warriors born of fire and steel, and their fight was far from over. The air was thick with smoke and ash as the war between humans and Varnak reached a new level of fury, and beneath the shattered skies of Caltheron, the battle hardened further into a grinding war of endurance and will. After months of brutal fighting, the Varnak found themselves trapped in a nightmare they could neither escape nor control. Every strike they launched was met by fierce counterattacks, every plan undone by humans who adapted faster than any enemy they had faced before. Leah Sato, now hardened by loss and sharpened by the unrelenting struggle, stood in the command center of the largest underground base still intact. Around her, survivors worked tirelessly, piecing together broken machines, assembling weapons from scraps, and running simulations for their next move. The colony's power grid, once vulnerable, had been stabilized through a network of backup generators and rerouted energy systems built by human ingenuity. The Varnak's advantage in technology was fading, and Leah knew it. The human resistance had reached a point where survival depended on striking back harder and smarter, and the weapon they had prepared for this moment was unlike anything the invaders could expect. The plan was risky, using the colony's makeshift energy reactors to generate a massive electromagnetic pulse that would fry the Varnak's electronic systems across the planet and in orbit, leaving them blind, deaf, and powerless. The pulse would spare the humans' jury-rigged tech, which relied on old-fashioned mechanics and clever engineering rather than delicate electronics. But activating the EMP would require close coordination and perfect timing. Leah's heart pounded as she gave orders to teams stationed in key locations, preparing the charge that could change the course of the war. Outside, the Varnak increased their attacks, sensing desperation among the humans. Their fleet loomed in the sky like a dark storm ready to crush all resistance, and ground forces pushed deeper into tunnels and ruins, trying to root out every last defender. The air was filled with the sounds of battle explosions, gunfire, shouted commands, and the cries of the wounded. The humans fought with every ounce of strength, refusing to give ground even as the enemy's firepower threatened to overwhelm them. Leah's mind raced, knowing that failure was not an option. At the crucial moment, the EMP was triggered. A low hum began, growing louder until it filled the tunnels and surface alike. Then, in a flash of brilliant light, the pulse swept through Caltheron, and the Varnak's machines ground to a halt. Ships in orbit lost power, weapons jammed, communication. Systems died, and their armor became useless shells. Confusion spread like wildfire among the invaders as their technology failed them all at once. The humans, prepared for this blackout, moved quickly. Teams armed with improvised weapons and simple tools advanced into the darkened battlefield, hunting the stunned Varnak who stumbled blindly without their systems to guide or protect them. Leah led one such group, moving silently through the debris and shadows, striking where the enemy was weakest. The invaders were no longer gods of war but frightened animals, vulnerable and confused. The resistance grew bolder, pushing the Varnak back step by step, turning the tide of the fight. Varnak commanders screamed orders that went unheard as radios and sensors lay dead. Without their advanced technology, their strength was halved, their control lost. Desperation crept into their ranks, and chaos threatened to consume their forces. In the center of this storm, Lee came face to face with the Varnak High General, the man who had brought destruction to Kaltheron. He stood battered and weary, surrounded by his few remaining loyal soldiers. For a moment, the war seemed to pause as the two stared at each other, warriors shaped by different worlds, yet bound by the same hunger to survive and win. Leah saw no honor in the general's eyes, only exhaustion and fear. Without hesitation, she approached him and handed over a simple tool, a worn human wrench, its metal scarred but sturdy. "This is what beat you," she said softly. "Remember it." The general took the wrench with trembling hands, his expression unreadable. He knew then that this was no longer a war of weapons and firepower, but a war of spirit and determination. With the Varnak systems crippled and their forces scattered, the humans tightened their hold on the planet. Survivors joined Leah's cause, inspired by the success of the EMP and the knowledge that even the mightiest enemy could be brought down by courage and cleverness. The war was far from over, but Kaltheron was no longer a place of fear. It was a symbol of resistance, a forge where the human spirit had been tested and tempered in ash and iron. As the last embers of the Varnak fleet fled the planet, leaving behind ruins and broken dreams, the people of Kaltheron looked toward a future they would fight to protect, a future born from fire, struggle, and the unbreakable will to survive. The silence that followed the retreat of the Varnak fleet was heavy, filled with an uneasy calm that settled over the battered world of Kaltheron like a quiet storm. The once vibrant colony lay in ruins, scarred by fire and war, but beneath the ash and broken metal, a spark of hope was growing stronger each day. Leah Sato walked through the devastated streets, her eyes scanning the horizon where the last Varnak ships disappeared into the darkness of space. The war had changed everything. The people, the land, and even the stars themselves seemed to bear witness to the struggle that had unfolded here. Survivors gathered, some to mourn, others to rebuild, and many to listen. Among them was a small group huddled around a flickering communication device, patched together from old parts and powered by the ingenuity of those who refused to give up. Leah stood beside the device, her heart pounding with anticipation. For months, they had been trying to send a message, a signal strong enough to reach the farthest reaches of space and warn others of the threat the Varnak posed not just to Kaltheron, but to all worlds they would conquer next. The message was simple yet powerful. Humans had survived the unthinkable, fought back against an overwhelming enemy, and were ready to stand united against any darkness that came their way. As the device crackled to life, a voice clear and determined carried across the airwaves, cutting through the silence. It spoke of resilience, of sacrifice, and of a fierce hope that no invasion could ever extinguish. The message was not just a call for help, but a declaration. Humanity was no longer prey to be hunted. It was a force to be reckoned with. Across the colony, the broadcast reached hidden survivors and scattered fighters who had stayed underground or fled to distant outposts. One by one, they responded, their replies echoing back like a chorus of defiance, weaving together a tapestry of strength and unity. But the message also carried a warning, a promise that humanity would not stand alone and would fight with every ounce of courage against those who threatened their freedom. Far beyond Kaltheron, in the depths of space where distant stars flickered like ancient sentinels, the signal traveled. It reached other human colonies, isolated settlements, and even neutral worlds watching warily from the sidelines. The message sparked something new, a beacon of hope and a reminder that even in the darkest times, light could be found. Meanwhile, Lee faced new challenges. Closer to home. The colony needed rebuilding, and with limited resources and constant threats from lingering Varnak forces, every day was a battle. Yet, the spirit that had carried them through the siege now inspired a relentless determination to reclaim their world. She worked alongside engineers, farmers, and fighters, helping to restore power, clear rubble, and strengthen defenses. The scars of war were deep, but the wounds of hope ran deeper still. One night, as Leah rested in the dim glow of the command center, a sudden alarm shattered the quiet. The screens flickered with incoming data, an unknown transmission was reaching them. It was not from any human source, but something else. The message was encrypted, filled with symbols and patterns unfamiliar to any who tried to decode it. The room filled with tension as experts worked feverishly to understand the signal. Leah felt a chill run down her spine. Was this another threat or something else entirely? Hours passed with no clear answer until the lead analyst whispered a startling revelation. The message was a warning, sent not to Caltheron, but to the Varnak. It spoke of a power greater than either side, an ancient force watching silently from the shadows of the galaxy, waiting for the right moment to rise. The implications were terrifying. Leah realized the war they had just survived was only the beginning, a prelude to something far larger and more dangerous. This knowledge changed everything. The humans of Caltheron were no longer isolated fighters. They were part of a vast, unfolding story that stretched beyond stars and planets. Leah gathered her closest allies to share what they had learned, and together they vowed to prepare not just for the Varnak, but for the shadow looming over all of existence. As the colony rebuilt and the message echoed through the galaxy, humanity stood united, ready to face whatever came next. The memory of the siege, the ghosts of the forge, and the fire of resistance had forged a people stronger than any enemy could break. Theirs was a message that would never fade, a message of hope, courage, and the unyielding will to survive. The story of Caltheron was only the beginning, and in the vastness of space, the echo of that message would inspire generations to come.